4-year-old Ethan Stacy caught the attention of his new neighbors right away when he moved in 10 days ago.
He was carrying not heavy things but bulky, and he was just a trooper, and I was laughing because it was so cute.
And during the search for him, a lot of that attention shifted to his new stepdad and mom.
She came out of the house and she was crying how, she was a bad mother to let something like this happen. And we all felt sorry for her.
Gone, neighbors say, are the feelings of empathy, replaced by disbelief at what the couple is accused of doing.
I'm so sick to my stomach. I don't see how anybody can do that to anybody, much less a little kid that can barely speak for himself.
Ethan Stacy was born on September 22, 2005 at the Fort Stewart Army Base in Savannah, Georgia. His mother's name was Stephanie Sloop and his father's name was Joe Stacy. Ethan was a loving, kind, and happy boy. He loved playing with his Transformers and watching the movie Cars over and over again. Ethan also relished in making people laugh with the jokes that he loved to tell. After Ethan's birth, the family relocated to Florida, but Joe and Stephanie's marriage would not last much longer, and they separated in 2009. After they did, Joe moved back to his hometown of Richland, Virginia, and Stephanie moved out to Utah. So Ethan's father, Joe, was an oil rig worker, and he had actually been expecting a large sum of money from an accident that had happened in 2008. And during the divorce settlement, he had offered to give Stephanie half of this settlement once he received it. And she, of course, accepted. But being greedy, Stephanie insisted that if Joe did not receive that money, she wanted full custody of their son, Ethan. The judge, however, said this was unenforceable. Originally, following his parents' split, Ethan had been living with his father in Virginia. After Joe and Stephanie had begun the process of divorce, Joe became more and more worried that his estranged wife was becoming unstable and unpredictable. Due to this, Joe had written in the divorce filings that Stephanie had abandoned their son Ethan, but he was afraid that she would come back and take him at any time, and then he was afraid he would never see his son again. A judge, however, would end up granting Stephanie visits with her son Ethan as part of their custody agreement. Ethan was to spend the school year with his father and then fly out to Utah to be with his mother for the summer. Now, ever since they had gone their separate ways, Stephanie had begun living in an apartment located in Layton, Utah, with her fiancé Nathan Sloop. Nathan and Stephanie had known each other since childhood, but had only recently begun dating in October of 2009. Nathan called his relationship with Stephanie a match made in heaven, and she was his perfect woman, he claimed. She also respected his bad boy side, he said. The couple, who had quickly become engaged, were planning on getting married just days after Stephanie and Joe's divorce was finalized. Also, right after the divorce was finalized, Ethan was scheduled to fly out to Utah to spend the summer with his mother Stephanie and her fiancé Nathan. Joe absolutely did not want his son to go to Utah, but Stephanie had made threats against him, including suing him for kidnapping. Ethan also did not want to go see his mother. He didn't even speak to her on the phone. In fact, when she did call, he would tell his father that he didn't want to talk to her. And Ethan hadn't seen his mother in quite some time. But it was court mandated, and nobody really had a choice in the matter. So on April 28, 2010, Joe put his son on an airplane, headed for Utah. So Stephanie's fiancé Nathan had been sending violent and threatening text messages to Joe even before Ethan's visit. For close to 6 months at that point, actually, which was part of the reason why Joe did not want his son to go out there. In addition, Joe and his family did not believe that Stephanie even really wanted custody of her son. They thought that she was only doing it to hurt Joe, like Ethan was just a pawn. And I wouldn't doubt it. On April 30th, 2 days after Ethan arrived in Utah, Nathan would send Joe yet another text message, but this one would be much different, and it said that his son would be safe in their home. Nathan said, "I will protect him with my life, yet respect your position as his father. You're a good man, Joe Stacy. I'm honored to know you. Wish it were other circumstances, but I have been truly impressed to see how you handle yourself as a man. Much respect from a man to a man." But Nathan is anything but a man, as you'll see. Nathan would go from hot to cold to hot again just a few days later. In a text message sent from Nathan's phone, though it might have been Stephanie writing it, it said, "You asshole. You've brainwashed my son so badly, I don't know what to do. I hate you, you selfish prick. Ethan is not coming back, and because of this lovely law called interstate custody, you can kiss your son goodbye." Nathan also sent Joe a recording of his son crying and saying that he didn't want to go back to his father's house in Virginia. "I don't want to go there," Ethan wailed, but Joe also heard his son say "ow" on the recording, so something was going on. So as you can probably tell, Nathan was a bit of a loose cannon, and he had a prior criminal history. In June of 2001, he had been charged with criminal conduct and disorderly conduct. 2 years later, he was found guilty of possession with intent to manufacture and produce a controlled substance. Then in October of 2003, Nathan had been found guilty of illegal possession and use of a controlled substance within 1,000 feet of a school. So Ethan hadn't been in Utah with his mother long when the Stacys, his father's family, began having a hard time getting a hold of the little boy. Whenever one of his family members would call to speak with Ethan, they were told that he was either asleep or outside playing. When they did talk to Ethan, they could hear the sloops in the background telling the boy what to say. Then, less than 2 weeks after Ethan had arrived at his mother's home on May 10th, 2010, Stephanie was calling 911, saying that he was missing. "I just woke up in the middle of the night and my 4-year-old child is missing," Stephanie said calmly on the 911 call. As the call continued, she did begin crying, but she tried to tell the dispatcher about her custody dispute with Ethan's father. That's until the dispatcher cut her off and asked her what her son was wearing when he disappeared, because that's more important. I assume she brought this up because she was in some way trying to set up Ethan's father, Joe, for his disappearance. "Oh, there's a custody dispute. You know, he must have come and kidnapped him." I'm not sure if that's what she was going with, but I'm guessing. Layton police immediately responded to the emergency call that had come from the Sloop's apartment, located in the Layton Meadows apartment complex. Once there, they met with Stephanie and Nathan. Stephanie told police that she believed her son Ethan had wandered out of the apartment in the middle of the night. She also said that 5 out of the last 10 nights, Ethan had wandered out of the apartment on his own. Police then began checking the surrounding area, including the apartment grounds, the trash receptacles, vehicles in the parking lot, a storage shed, and surrounding businesses. But after searching for hours and coming up with nothing, detectives once again interviewed the Sloops, and that's when their story began to change. The couple would end up telling police that Ethan was dead, and his body was located in the Ogden Valley, near Wolf Canyon Trail, about 25 minutes from their home. After that, Nathan would lead officers to where he had buried Ethan's body, and his little body had been wrapped up in 8 trash bags, then buried, and dog food had then been scattered on top of his grave. As if that wasn't bad enough, the little boy's face had been badly disfigured in an attempt to conceal his identity. He had been burned, and his face looked like it had been smashed in with a hammer. About 100 yards off the trailhead, in an area described as rugged, muddy, and wet, and not far from where Ethan's body had been found, detectives discovered and collected various pieces of evidence. They would end up finding, among other things, a bloody curtain, a blood-covered hammer with its handle broken off, a used bottle of lighter fluid, ammonia, duct tape, and Ethan's sweatshirt. Ethan's body had 2nd and 3rd degree burns on 17.5% of it, from the tops of his feet up to his thighs.
On May 10th, 2010, at approximately 11:55 p.m., Layton Police Department received a call about a missing boy. The child was identified as 4-year-old Ethan Stacy. Ethan's mother said she put him to bed around 9 p.m. When she checked on him later, he was gone. She told officers that Ethan had snuck out of the home on prior occasions. Officers arrived within 5 minutes. They met with the parents, obtained a description of Ethan, and started checking the area to include the apartment grounds, trash receptacles, vehicles in the parking lot, storage shed, and area businesses. K-9 units from the Layton Police Department, Davis County Sheriff's Office, and a bloodhound dog from the West Valley Police Department were called to aid in the search. Additionally, officers on scene used thermal imaging and night vision equipment to assist in the search. A countywide attempt to locate was issued for Ethan at 12:35 a.m. Within the first 90 minutes, All Layton Police Department detectives had been notified. Reverse 911 calls were made within a half-mile radius, and the Davis area CART team had been activated. Additionally, a list of known sex offenders within a 1 square mile radius had been obtained. An endangered person alert was issued in this case due to the child's age, the time lapse, and the elements. The situation did not fit the criteria for an Amber Alert in this case. Amber Alert requires that the child be under 18 years of age, requires a confirmed abduction, evidence that the child is in danger of death or serious bodily injury, and information that can be sent to the public that can help in the apprehension of the child or the arrest of the suspect. Officers from Layton Police Department and Davis area CART team, FBI agents, adult probation and parole, as well as Child Protective Services and Davis County Search and Rescue personnel were assembled. Within 2.5 hours after receiving the call, an additional reverse 911 notification was made, extending that area to 1 mile. By 3:30 in the morning, the initial area was searched thoroughly. Personal contact was made with all the registered sex offenders in the target area. Their homes were searched, and door-to-door canvass of the apartment community was completed. By 5 a.m., additional searches had been done in the area of the apartment. Persons of interest were interviewed, and information was obtained leading us to the possible burial site in the area of Powder Mountain. This information was obtained at approximately 11 a.m. Due to weather and terrain, it was difficult to process this crime scene. The crime scene is currently being processed by Weber County CSI in conjunction with the Layton Police Department. At approximately 5 p.m., a body of a juvenile male matching Ethan's description was discovered at this site. Charges are being filed against the mother and stepfather in this case.
A medical examiner would determine that Ethan's death had been caused by a combination of scalding injuries, drug toxicity, and aspiration pneumonia, which is caused by an inhalation of foreign material into the lungs, possibly vomit. Ethan had also suffered from dehydration, and multiple substances had been found in his body. This included Xanax and substances indicative of Tylenol and Benadryl, and these medications appeared to have been administered in adult doses. Nathan Sloop was charged with aggravated homicide, felony child abuse, obstruction of justice, and desecration of a corpse. Stephanie Sloop was charged with felony child abuse, obstruction of justice, and desecration of a corpse. The additional charge of aggravated murder would later be added to Stephanie's 3 other charges. Both pled not guilty and insisted that Nathan's death was only an accident. Oh yeah, a hammer to his head was just an accident? When Nathan again spoke with detectives, he told them that he believed Ethan's father, Joe, had taught the child to misbehave in an effort to hurt Stephanie. He also told them that Stephanie believed that her ex-husband had destroyed her boy, and she had asked Nathan to teach him to be a man. He's 4. 4. And she wanted him to do this by either beating him or whatever it took to get her boy back.
ABC4's Kelly O'Hara is live at the jail with an exclusive interview with Stephanie's best friend of 10 years. Kelly.
Well, Karen, she tells me that she's at a loss for words, and just yesterday she wrote Stephanie a letter and dropped it in the mail asking her simply why. Now, the two were best friends for a decade, and now she tells me their friendship is shattered. And she says if Stephanie Sloop is guilty of what she is potentially charged with, then she says she gets what she deserves.
She's done a complete 180 because this isn't the Stephanie I know at all. This isn't the Stephanie any of us know.
Tina Reyes, Stephanie Sloop's best friend, struggles to understand. She says that Stephanie, she has known for 10 years, would have taken the alleged beating for her son and done anything to protect him. Now she's sitting in a jail cell, accused in taking part in her son's murder.
Stephanie's always been there for me. She was, yes, a control freak, and like people say, vindictive and manipulative, but I don't know anybody who isn't.
Tina even has pictures of Ethan Stacy with her daughter. This picture also shows Stephanie looking over the children.
It hurts my heart because I've known her for so long. She's like my sister, but there's no reason for this. There's no excuse. I don't think she'd ever be resentful or anything of her son. She's never Never said anything negative about having him or anything. She even wanted more kids.
Reyes says it all started to go downhill after the divorce from Ethan's father and this trip to Vegas.
She was in Vegas, and then all of a sudden she was in Utah and madly in love with some guy that I've never even heard of, ever.
Reyes did talk to the 27-year-old accused murderer last week before she got married, but hasn't spoken to her since and is now left to wonder.
I don't know if she was on drugs or what could have possibly have happened.
When it came time for Stephanie to speak with police, she told them that on May 5th, Nathan had taken Ethan into a bedroom and began slapping him and hitting him in the face and head. This had caused Ethan's face to swell up. And from that point on, Ethan was vomiting, lethargic, had a fever, and couldn't eat. These symptoms were consistent with a possible brain injury. But instead of trying to help the child, Nathan had engaged in even more violent abuse. And Stephanie had never gotten any help for her son either, even though she knew he badly needed it. On top of that, she had also documented the abuse of her son. There were photos found in her phone that showed Ethan's face swelling more and more as time went by. This swelling of the face, Nathan had previously tried to tell police, was because the little boy had a peanut allergy. So the day after all that had happened, on May 6th, while Ethan was laying there in serious pain, the couple decided that they were going to go to the courthouse and get married. They, of course, weren't going to take Ethan with them, though, saying that they were afraid to bring him out in public because of the swelling and bruising on his face. They thought if anyone saw his injuries, they would call the authorities. I hope they would. But you never know. Instead of bringing him, what the pair had done to the badly injured little boy was put him inside his bedroom and then remove the doorknob so that he couldn't get out of his room unassisted. The day following their marriage, on May 7th, Stephanie said she had arrived back home from shopping to find that Ethan had been scalded on his feet, legs, and buttocks. Nathan told her that the boy had burned himself in the bathtub, though he hadn't been in the room at the time, so he hadn't actually witnessed it. He had just heard Ethan scream. But what had actually happened was when Stephanie went out, Nathan decided he was going to give Ethan a bath and intentionally made the water much too hot. Ethan then began screaming that it was too hot when Nathan walked out of the room. So Nathan walked back in, told him it was not hot, and shoved him down into the water. He told investigators that this made Ethan cry, but that wasn't anything new because the boy had cried from the day he had come home. That day when Stephanie had come home, she had also noticed that there were feces in Ethan's mouth, and she brought him to the bathroom and began scrubbing his teeth. She scrubbed so hard, in fact, that she made his gums bleed. Stephanie said that Nathan was the one to put feces in her son's mouth, but Nathan, of course, said it was Stephanie who had done it. Nathan said that Stephanie had been slapping the shit out of Ethan because she had just gone over the edge, and then suddenly she grabbed feces and shoved him in his mouth. But regardless of who had done this to Ethan, on May 9th, which was also Mother's Day, the sleuths discovered the little boy dead in his bed. And after finding his lifeless body, the couple worked together to formulate a plan so they could escape prosecution. First, Stephanie had gone to a hardware store where she bought lighter fluid, gloves, and a shovel. She had then returned back home, and her and Nathan had wrapped up Ethan's body in the trash bags and then taped it up. From there, the sleuths had driven to Powder Mountain, where Ethan was burned, disfigured, and then buried. They had then burned other evidence at the gravesite. And apparently part of the reason why they had so badly disfigured Ethan's face was because Stephanie was afraid they would identify him by his dental records. After Stephanie and Nathan had buried Ethan, they seemed to show no remorse, and Nathan even sent his wife a text message that same day saying, "Baby, can you get some antioxidant vitamins, please? That would be great. I can't wait to take you to Happy Sumo. Memories. Love you." The pair also exchanged sexually charged text messages over the next few days, as well as went on a few dates. So almost immediately after Ethan had arrived in Utah, the abuse had began. And Nathan had told police that he had disciplined him by either slapping him or spanking him a few times, but he never thought that that amounted to abuse. Sure you didn't. A preliminary hearing was held to determine if there was enough evidence to bring Nathan and Stephanie to trial for Ethan's murder. His defense was arguing that the boy's death was only an accident and had been caused by over-medication of over-the-counter drugs. However, a toxicologist spoke and presented evidence that showed that none of the drugs that had been found in Ethan's body on their own would have caused his death. And due to the fact that Ethan had been dehydrated as well, that would increase the effects of the medication, but it still would not have resulted in his death. The medical examiner went on to talk about bruising that had been found on Ethan's head, a loose tooth, hemorrhaging of his eyes, long bruises on his thigh, and injuries to the boy's genitals. And the aspiration pneumonia that had been a contributing factor in Ethan's death, they determined had been caused, most likely, by the feces that he had been forced to eat. The medical examiner also said that Ethan's stomach had been empty at the time of his death, which means he hadn't eaten in hours. After Ethan had died, his skull had been fractured in numerous places, which was believed to be from the hammer. And his face had been burned with chemicals that strongly smelled of ammonia. A few of Nathan's phone calls from jail to his ex-wife and mother were played in court. In a few of the conversations, he would refer to his new stepson, Ethan, as poison, and said that ever since the little boy had arrived, his and Stephanie's relationship had gone down like a battleship. Nathan had also told his mother that Ethan was getting out of his room every single night, sneaking into the fridge and playing PlayStation. That was part of the reason why he was so angry with him. And in yet another phone call, Nathan would say that he had destroyed 2 women's lives. I assume he's talking about his mother and Stephanie. And then he said it was all just because he wanted to get laid more. Are you effing kidding me? The court was also shown a photograph of Nathan and Ethan sitting on the couch playing video games together. The boy's face was red, swollen, and bruised. Nathan looked at the pictures and then immediately looked away. He couldn't even look at what he had done. Coward. The prosecution then played a tape that Nathan had made with Ethan on April 29th. In it, Nathan was forcing Ethan to say that he didn't like his real father and didn't want to go back and live with him. Even making the little boy lie and say that his father spanked him and he didn't feel safe with him. In another video taken by Nathan, Ethan says, "I'm having fun with Nathan. He's not scary anymore." "You're such a good boy," Nathan said back to him.
"You're such a good boy. I like you."
Prosecutors showed a conference on child abuse prevention some of the evidence they collected in the case against Nathan Sloop, including recordings of 4-year-old Ethan Stacy taken by Sloop himself. It was tough to watch as prosecutors detailed the horrific abuse of Ethan and the personal toll the case took on officers. Ethan Stacy was hit, scalded in a bathtub, and eventually given so much over-the-counter drugs, he died.
There were also a few text messages found between Nathan and Stephanie that were presented as evidence. In one message, Nathan says, "I told you we had a pit bull on our hands, but they learn." Stephanie then messaged back, "Just like mommy, LOL." To which Nathan replied, "I told you we had to break his ego." Then a few days later, Stephanie would text Nathan saying, "He is broke, that's for sure." And then Nathan replied back, "Had to figure out how to keep him in his room." The prosecution also brought up the fact that in the 11 months leading up to Ethan's death, Nathan had taken 4,146 prescribed pills. It was questioned how someone can even function on that many pills a day. On average, that's over 13 pills each and every day. And these medications included Lortab, Valium, Percocet, and Xanax. So, heavy medication. It would end up being determined that there indeed was enough evidence to bring both Stephanie and Nathan to trial. And the prosecution said that they were absolutely going to be seeking the death penalty. But before he could go to trial, Nathan accepted a plea deal, and he pled guilty to aggravated murder in February of 2014. As part of the plea deal, the other charges against him were dropped. This deal also spared him from possibly receiving the death penalty. Nathan admitted that he should have taken Ethan to the emergency room, but he had been afraid that he would go to prison. So he didn't. He thought of himself, and only himself. He also said that he was mentally ill, and that he knew that he had made mistakes that had led to Ethan's death. He told the judge, "The boy died on my watch, and I'm horribly sorry." Nathan Sloop would be sentenced to 25 years to life for Ethan's murder, and he would also be sentenced to 15 years to life for assaulting a deputy, which had happened in the time since he had been incarcerated.
Inside the courtroom, Stephanie Sloop cried. Her husband Nathan appeared to twitch slightly. The couple was told that because it's a potential death penalty case, they'd be getting new lawyers who are qualified to handle it. As he was led out of the courtroom, Nathan Sloop spotted his mother and mouthed the words, "I love you." She declined to comment to reporters. Outside the courthouse, protesters carried signs and demanded justice for Ethan Stacy.
We just thought maybe they'd come out and join us in our little demonstration, the lovely Mr. and Mrs. Sloop, but I don't think that's going to happen, do you?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Ethan's father had flown in to attend the court hearing. He said that the first time he had met his ex-wife's new partner, Nathan, was before his son had even gone to Utah, and at the time, he had thought that the man had come off as polite and level-headed. Boy, was he wrong. During the hearing, prosecutors had also told Joe that Nathan wanted to personally speak to him and apologize, but Joe didn't want to hear any of it. Then in November of 2014, Stephanie would also take a plea deal. She pled guilty to aggravated murder and obstruction of justice. In exchange for her plea deal, prosecutors took the death penalty off the table and dropped her other charges of child abuse and desecration of a body. 31-year-old Stephanie Sloop said in court, "I am entirely responsible because I am his mommy." She claimed that she had suffered from battered wife syndrome, and she was scared of Nathan, which is why she had never gotten medical attention for her son. And that's why she went to the courthouse and married him the next day too, right? Stephanie wept and said that she does not know who she is without her son. She would also say that she had a prescription medication addiction at the time that her son had been abused and killed, which is why her judgment had been so severely diminished. The judge would order that Stephanie serve 20 years to life for aggravated murder and 15 years for obstruction of justice. He ordered these sentences be served concurrently. In the aftermath of Ethan's murder, questions were raised about the judge's decision to allow him to go to Utah to spend the summer with his mother. According to Judge Smith, who had been the one to approve the custody agreement, there had been no arguments made in court regarding the possibility that Ethan would be possibly in danger with his mother. She also had not read Joe's initial petition that had clearly stated that his ex-wife was not to be trusted. And if a background check had been done on Nathan at all, it would have revealed that in addition to his other charges, he had also abused his ex-wife. And he had made threats to kill her and her new boyfriend. A candlelight vigil was held in Layton, Utah, and more than 100 people attended to honor Ethan's memory. Many held candles while others, some who had seen him in the apartment complex and others who had never known him, offered heartfelt words of sorrow and consolation. Others hoped his death served as a warning that neighbors needed to be involved in watching out for the welfare of children everywhere. Local residents had also placed a cross on the trail in Eden where 4-year-old Ethan Stacy's body had been found on May 11, 2010. And funeral services for Ethan were held on May 19, 2010 at the Grundy Funeral Home Chapel. He was then buried in the Clinch Valley Memorial Cemetery in Richlands, Virginia. Joe Stacy said about his son, "You never met such a loving boy at his age. He's always running up to you and hugging you, always telling you he loves you." Well, thank you for listening to all of Ethan's story today. This story is infuriating. Joe knew that his ex-wife couldn't be trusted, and Ethan didn't even want to go see his mother. Children need to start being listened to when it comes to custody cases. They know if they're not being treated right, and it's their lives. Just because they're children doesn't mean they're not people too. They deserve to have their voices heard. There are way too many instances of children being beaten by a parent or parents.
People say that she just vanished. No, people do not just vanish. Everybody sees something. Whether it's stuck in your mind and you forget about it and later on you remember, but somebody must have seen her somewhere. Somebody must have seen who she was with. Somebody must have seen her playing somewhere.
Joshlin Smith was born on October 23, 2017, to her mother, Kelly Smith, and her father, Jose M.K., in South Africa. She was a soft-hearted and very friendly young girl who was said to always have a smile on her face. The 6-year-old was in the first grade at Diazville Primary School, where she had many friends. Joshlin and her family lived in a small government-subsidized shack that was located in Saldanha Bay, South Africa, which is about 35 miles away from Cape Town. Here, she lived with her mother, Kelly, her mother's boyfriend, Shaquin Apollos, or Bota as he was commonly referred to, and her 2 siblings. Then suddenly, on February 19, 2024, Joshlin's mother, Kelly, reported her as missing. She claimed that her daughter hadn't been feeling well that morning, so instead of sending her off to school for the day, Kelly left her at home around 8 that morning with her boyfriend Bota while she went off to work. When she later returned around 5 p.m., both Bota and Joshlin were gone. Authorities immediately began to search for the 6-year-old, and as word spread about her disappearance, many residents joined in looking for her as well. Quickly, Kelly's boyfriend Bota would be found smoking in a shed. That's when the first red flags began to go off for authorities. Because upon Kelly seeing her boyfriend, the very first thing that she asked him was if he had refilled a gas can, not where her daughter was. Then, when police began to question Bota, they got the sense that he was hiding something as well, because he got very nervous and started pacing. Detectives also had to ask him the same question multiple times, and he could not seem to remember who exactly had been in the home that day. Eventually, he would tell authorities that the 6-year-old had gone to play with some friends around 2 p.m. and he had never seen her again after. From there, a massive week-long search for the little girl ensued, which included the use of canine search dogs, helicopters, rescue boats, and volunteers going door to door. While Joshlin wasn't located, a police dog did discover a blood-stained bedsheet and pillowcase inside the young girl's home during this time. After there was no sign of Joshlin for days, on February 27, 2024, police had to scale back their search. But they made it clear that they were not giving up.
We have been searching from Joshlin went missing on that Monday. We started the search on the Tuesday, and from the Tuesday still now, not even Saturday, Sundays, we're searching, and we really hope to get our child, because and whether she's alive, whether she's not, we just want Joshlin, so justice can prevail. And if she is not alive, and I hope and I pray every day that she will be, but if she's not, the community will get closer, and we will make sure that those who did it to her, they must get what they deserve. That's why we just want our child back. But our hopes are we are firmly believing that she is still alive. That's why we will not stop. SAPS will not make us stop. We will stand here from the morning till the evening. We will stand and we will look for our child, because it's not Kelly's child, it's our child, it's the community child, and we're not gonna stop. That is for sure. We're not gonna stop searching.
Also around this time, Kelly's boyfriend Bota made a public statement saying that he felt responsible for Joshlin's disappearance. However, he maintained that he had no idea what had happened to her. Soon, rumors began flying that Kelly had sold her daughter for around 20,000 African rand, or $1,000. According to Joshlin's biological father, he believed that his daughter's disappearance had something to do with her mother's drug problem and the debt that she had accumulated as a result. He believed that this had caused the mother to sell Joshlin so she could pay it all back. A few days later, on March 2nd, a search was done in an open field near Joshlin's house, and items of clothing that were thought to belong to the little girl were found, stained with blood. However, after the items were sent in for DNA testing, it was determined that they did not belong to her. And once again, police had no leads as to Joshlin's whereabouts. Or so it seemed, because just days after that, on March 5th, her mother, Kelly, who was pregnant at the time again, would be placed under arrest. Kelly's boyfriend, Bota Apollos, was also arrested, along with his friend, Stefano Van Rijn, and a woman named Phumza Sagaya. All 4 adults were charged with kidnapping and human trafficking. There was a rumor that Phumza Sagaya, who was also for some reason sometimes called Makalima, was what's known as a Sangoma in South Africa, or a traditional healer. She had been arrested because both Bota and Stefano had alleged that Joshlin's mother, Kelly, had instructed them to leave the little girl with Phumza that day. However, these charges against the alleged Sangoma would later be dropped, as there was not enough evidence to prove this. Phumza lived right down the road from Joshlin and her family, but she denied being a Sangoma or personally knowing the little girl or her family. Though she did admit she'd seen Joshlin, Kelly, and one of Joshlin's siblings on the day the 6-year-old went missing. Phumza said that she had been inside her own home when the trio had passed her house around 4 p.m. carrying a gas canister. They politely waved to one another, but then she had never seen them again. Phumza would go on to later claim that while she was being held by police, she had been tortured into admitting that Joshlin was in her care. Something that both Bota and Stefano would also say had happened to them while they were in police custody, which was why they had made the false allegations against Phumza to begin with. Now, when Joshlin's mother, Kelly, had originally been brought in for questioning, police discovered that she had only alerted them more than 6 hours after her daughter had originally gone missing. As I had previously mentioned, authorities additionally noticed that Kelly had been rather calm in the frantic search for Joshlin, and she was more concerned with her boyfriend's whereabouts than her daughter's. On March 13th, 2024, less than a week after they had been arrested, Kelly, Bota, and Stefano all withdrew their efforts to be freed on bail. It was believed that this was due to the fact that the community had been threatening the three as to what would happen to them if they were released. People were furious that Joshlin was missing, and no one was speaking.
We just want the mother in Kelly to wake up. We need the mother in Kelly to wake up. Her child is looking for her. Her child is calling for her. Her child is missing. Is that child is looking for no one, not for one of us who's supporting this case. The child where she is looking for that woman called Kelly.
Then a local pastor would talk to authorities, and he would tell them that back in August of 2023, he had heard the girl's mother, Kelly, saying that she was going to sell her children for around 20,000 rand. She claimed that she had been waiting on some people who were supposed to come earlier but had disappointed her. The mother said that she was also willing to accept a much lower amount for her children, around only $275. Kelly had then rather ominously told this pastor that he would see with his own eyes what would happen around January or February. Apparently, during the search for her daughter, Kelly had spoken to one of Joshlin's teachers who was also helping look for the girl. And Kelly told her that she had received a phone call from a Nigerian male who told her that she needed to pay quickly. Kelly then told the teacher that her daughter was already on a ship inside a shipping container that was on its way to West Africa. When Kelly was asked by the teacher if she had called the police with this information, she informed her that she hadn't, because the community had become so hostile towards her. The teacher stated that Kelly then looked at her and said, "Remember, Bota is not guilty." An employer of Kelly's would additionally speak to police, and she would tell them that Kelly had occasionally cleaned her home. One time, Kelly had informed him that she had been approached by a Sangoma who wanted to purchase her daughter. This man stated that he believed Joshlin had been mistaken for an albino due to her light skin and light eyes, and that the Sangoma wanted her for witchcraft. A little while after Kelly, Bota, and Stefano were placed under arrest, a woman named Laurentia Lombard was also arrested, and she was believed to be yet another person who was responsible for Joshlin's disappearance. Laurentia was a friend and neighbor of Kelly's, and she was believed to have been one of the last people to see the little girl. One of the other defendants, Stefano, claimed that he had seen Laurentia leave the home with Joshlin, and then she never returned. He believed that it was actually Laurentia's boyfriend who had given the little girl to a traditional healer. But then the charges against Laurentia would be dropped, and she was given immunity to testify against the others in court. The trial for Joshlin's mother, Kelly, and the two other defendants would begin in March of 2025. By this time, Joshlin still had not been found, and police had very little to go on, it seemed. During the trial, which was held in a community center so that more people would be able to attend, it was revealed that the Department of Social Development, similar to social services here, had been involved with Joshlin's family since 2016. There had been reports since then stating that Kelly was a regular drug user, was abusive towards her family, and didn't have a job. The department had been notified back in February of 2016 that Kelly had been using substances and neglecting her son, who was by now 11 years old. The mother had allegedly screamed at, swore at, and threatened to stab the boy. Kelly had also threatened her grandmother, the same grandmother whom authorities would learn had taken in Kelly's son. And since then, the mother rarely had contact with him, which seems to be a good thing. That same year, they also discovered that Kelly had continued to use drugs throughout her pregnancy with Joshlin. Now, the mother had sought help for her drug addiction multiple times. Once in May of 2018, once in August of 2018, and then again in March of 2020. While Kelly had been living with Joshlin's biological father, Jose, it was said that their relationship was very toxic and often got physical. So the mother, who knew that during these times the home was unsafe for her daughter, would frequently drop Joshlin off with their relatives, Natasha and Lionel Andrews. Now, Natasha and her husband loved Joshlin like she was their own child. The couple had their own children too, so the little girl would spend lots of time playing with them. At the Andrews home, Joshlin had her own bed, and the family even took her on trips, as well as bought her new clothes and new toys. Natasha had even taken care of Joshlin more long-term back in May of 2018 when her mother Kelly had entered a drug rehab program. Natasha and her husband Lionel had attempted to adopt the girl at this point. However, that had fallen through after Joshlin's biological mother and father completely rejected the idea. Now, speaking of Joshlin's mother Kelly, she would admit that she had smoked the drug Tick, which is similar to crystal meth, on the morning that her daughter disappeared. Kelly went on to explain that on the morning of February 19th, her children did not have any clean clothes, so that's why she had kept them home from school that day. When she had later gone into work after leaving Joshlin and her sibling with Bota, she had borrowed some money from her employer so that she could purchase some drugs. Drugs that she would smoke during her lunch break later that day with Bota. When Kelly later returned back home around 4 p.m., she didn't see Joshlin anywhere and asked her boyfriend where the girl was. Bota told her that she was around, and Kelly took his word for it. The couple, along with Stefano, then left the house to go purchase some more drugs and some gasoline. When they arrived back close to an hour later, Kelly would call out for her daughter, but received no response. At that point, she finally started to worry and began looking for Joshlin. But according to Bota's lawyer, after Kelly had returned home, their neighbor Laurentia and friend Stefano had come over to smoke the drugs. While they were doing so, Joshlin ran off with a friend, and they didn't see her again after. While Bota was being questioned in court, he would also say that after Joshlin disappeared, he had been approached by a male police officer, who instructed him to say that Kelly and Stefano had taken Joshlin to a local Sangoma and sold her for 20,000 rand. The officer then told him that someone would be arriving later to take his statement, and he better repeat the same version of events. So Bota testified that while he had been speaking with this officer later, he had fabricated other parts of the story to make it more believable, including a supposed conversation that he had had with Kelly on Sunday night before Joshlin vanished. The court would also hear that when Joshlin had first gone missing, her mother Kelly didn't even have any pictures of her to give to authorities. She had to get photos from the little girl's aunt. The mother additionally claimed during an earlier police interview that her missing child had made her famous. Regardless, Kelly's former employer, Carlene Zegers, testified that despite Kelly's struggles, she was still a good mother who had raised her children well, which I have a hard time believing. Then it was time for the state's star witness, Laurentia Lombard, the family's friend and neighbor who had previously also been arrested, but was now testifying. She told the court about Kelly's bad temper and violent behavior, saying that she had previously smashed a window and injured herself doing so. Additionally, she stated that Kelly had once threatened her boyfriend Bota, telling him that she was going to stab him to death. Laurentia claimed that she had gone to Kelly's house on the morning of February 18th, 2024, and at that time, her children were with her. This was something, however, that she had failed to mention in her interview with police. One of the many things that would end up making people question her testimony. Laurentia went on to say that on the morning of February 18th, she had been on her way to Kelly's house so that she could smoke some drugs with them and Stefano. Once she had arrived, she witnessed Kelly and Bota having a heated argument, during which time Kelly had lost her temper and threatened her boyfriend Bota with a knife. After that, Kelly received a phone call, and Laurentia overheard her saying that she was coming now. Then Kelly and Joshlin had left the home and walked towards a white car that seemed to be waiting for them. There, Laurentia claimed to have seen a woman who was dressed like a Sangoma talking to the mother and daughter. She then saw the Sangoma hand Kelly something, and the mother slid this in the front of her pants. Upon Kelly and Joshlin returning to the home, Kelly told Bota that she had received the money for her daughter. It was at this point that Laurentia confronted Kelly and asked her what was going on. The mother told her that she had sold her daughter to a healer because she was in desperate need of money and badly struggling. She had received around 20,000 rand for the girl, or as I had said, close to $1,000 US. When Laurentia asked Kelly what she was going to do with this money, she was offered 1,000 South African rand, or about $54 US, in exchange for her silence. Stefano, who was also there, had been offered around 1,200 rand, or about $65 US. She had accepted the offer, but claimed that she never saw the money. Laurentia had then witnessed Kelly preparing a bag for Joshlin, which included pants, a sweater, and underwear. The Sangoma was supposed to be picking her up the next day at 2 p.m., and according to Laurentia, this was exactly what she'd seen happen on the afternoon of February 19th. She had been at the home again that day, when she had witnessed Kelly and Joshlin walk towards a white car. They both got inside, and it drove away. Laurentia then told police officers that the person who had taken Joshlin had taken her for her eyes and skin. And according to her, she had tried without success to stop Kelly from selling her daughter. Though the thing is, according to Joshlin's brother, Laurentia had not even been at the home on the morning of February 19th. The brother said that he had actually been there for lunch around 2 p.m. that day. And at that time, Joshlin was also still there. He left the house a little while later, and when he returned around 6 p.m., his sister was gone. Another child, a friend of Joshlin's, had told police that when she had returned home from school on February 19th, she had seen Joshlin playing, which would have been hours after Laurentia said that the healer had picked her up. When she was called out by the judge for making mistakes at least 4 times during her testimony, she began shaking and crying. Laurentia would try to say that the discrepancies in her testimony were because she was terrified, confused, and had been using drugs for about a week before she had been taken in for police questioning, so she was not in a sober mind. She apologized and said that she had made a mistake. Laurentia's emotional distress would cause the court to adjourn, with the proceedings only continuing the following day.
Lombard told the court that when she got to Smith's house on the 18th, she was agitated and confrontational towards her boyfriend, Apollos. Joshlin was reported missing by her mother the next day.
Kelly came out with a knife. She went to Buddha. Then she said, I'll stab you to death.
My instructions are, and I'm putting it to my client, Apollos, he denies that Kelly, as I've already put, broke a window there, and he denies that Kelly came and threatened to stab him. What's your comment? Do you have a comment about it?
I saw that, my lord.
During further cross-examination, Lombard appeared emotional and was escorted away for a short while. When she returned, she was confronted with discrepancies in her statement. The one that seemed to have affected her the most was whether she had taken her children with her to Smith's house on the morning of the 18th of February. At first she said she did, and then she confirmed she didn't.
We spent the last almost 3/4 of an hour on the same point. And now suddenly you're telling me, but you made a mistake. But you've made the mistake at least 4 times.
No,
and it took 45, almost, it's 44 minutes.
No,
to get the concession out. Do you have any explanation for this?
My Lord, I don't know how to explain this, but I'm sorry, my Lord, and for that. My Lord, I see the witness is shaking and she's being emotional, my Lord.
Do
Do you want a moment, Miss Lombard?
When court resumed the next day, Kelly's own sister, Michaela Daniels, would take the stand. She was also a police constable, and she testified that Kelly had told her that Joshlin was missing, but she knew that she would be found. Kelly had said to her, "My child is here in the informal settlement, and someone wants to sell my child, but Saldanha is currently a hot spot." When Michaela started to ask her sister further questions, Kelly wouldn't answer and told her that she had already answered these questions for police, so would not answer them for her as well. While Michaela said that Kelly had contacted her the very same day that Joshlin went missing, and at first she seemed to be very concerned, Kelly had later seemed rather happy about Joshlin's disappearance, and told Michaela that Gaten McKenzie, the Minister of Sports, Arts, and Culture, was now financially assisting her. So the court case, which has now been going on for a total of 8 weeks, is still ongoing, and Joshlin has yet to be found. An investigating officer on the case said that the extensive and international search for the little girl has included satellite assistance, help from Interpol, and many online researchers. The investigating team has previously tried to use CCTV footage from Diazville and the wider Saldanha Bay area in order to try to locate Joshlin. However, they found that there were no municipal cameras on the street where Kelly and her daughter lived. Authorities had also previously received information that Interpol suspected that Joshlin may have been taken aboard a ship. But after that ship docked in Wales and was searched, there was no sign of her, and the search for her continues. Well, thank you for listening to Joshlin's story today. I think it's pretty clear that her mother, Kelly, sold her to someone, and that's absolutely heartbreaking. How can a mother do that to their own child, not knowing what kind of horrific things could happen to them as a result? Hopefully, she's punished accordingly, and maybe one day little Joshlin will be found alive and saved from the terrible fate that her mother sold her into. What do you think happened to Joshlin? Is her mother, Kelly, to blame? Kaylee Slusher was born on May 3, 2010, to her mother, Sarah Kruger, and her father, Jason Slusher, in Napa, California. She was a smart little girl who loved playing dress-up, loved watching Sophia the First, and her favorite colors were pink and purple. Kaylee was a happy, bubbly 3-year-old little girl who was always smiling. Back in the summer of 2005, when Kaylee's mother, Sarah, was only 15, she met a guy who was 17 by the name of Ryan Warner. They had a brief relationship and used methamphetamine together. That's until Ryan moved away at the end of the summer. However, the following year, when Sarah was only 16, she met a guy named Jason Slusher at a drug house. And both Sarah and Jason were avid methamphetamine users at this point. The two began dating when Sarah was 17, and Jason and Sarah would move in with Jason's parents. So the two lived there for a few years, until they eventually got their own apartment at the Royal Garden Apartments in Napa. Now, methamphetamine use was not the only problem that Jason and Sarah shared. Both of them also had very violent tempers. They argued often, and Sarah at one point had hit Jason over the head with a 2x4, and Jason retaliated by slamming Sarah's arm in the car door. A friend of the couple said that they had seen Sarah and Jason fighting often, and at one point, Jason had thrown something at Sarah, and Sarah retaliated by pulling out a knife on Jason. Now, at the time that Kaylee was born in May of 2010, Jason would actually be in jail for slamming Sarah's arm in the car door. When Jason was released from jail, he continued his methamphetamine use, even though Sarah was now clean. She had quit when she found out she was pregnant with Kaylee and had remained clean ever since. Due to Jason's continued drug use and the fact that Sarah was now clean, the couple would fight even more often, and they ended up splitting up in 2012. At that point, Sarah and Kaylee moved out of the apartment that they shared with Jason, and they moved into a new 2-bedroom apartment in the same apartment complex. At some point, Jason had moved back in with them, but in June of 2013, he had gone back to prison as he had broken the terms of his parole when he threatened to kill Sarah and kidnap Kaylee. For the first 3 years of Kaylee's life, even though she had a somewhat unstable environment, she was a happy and healthy child. Sarah was loving and attentive towards her. In fact, people would say that she was a great mother at that time. Sarah would also take Kaylee to visit her family as well as Jason's family regularly. Now, back in the summer of 2011, Sarah reconnected with her ex-boyfriend, Ryan, on Facebook. They had only talked online since then, but when Jason went back to jail in August of 2013, Sarah invited Ryan over to the apartment to visit. And at first, he was only going to be there to visit, but after staying for a few days, he decided to move in. Now, when Ryan first moved in, Sarah said that he acted like a stepfather towards Kaylee. He played with her, helped toilet train her, fed her, and he just seemed to love her. Though sometimes Ryan would make Kaylee sit on the toilet for 15 to 20 minutes at a time in order to have a bowel movement. Now, Ryan and Sarah would argue about this because Sarah thought it was much too long to have her sit there. But Ryan told Sarah that Kaylee was so backed up and constipated, and it was borderline child abuse to let her hold it in all day. And because she was in so much pain when she finally did move her bowels, Sarah decided that Ryan was right. And it was better for Kaylee to sit on the toilet than to be in pain. Now, unfortunately, as soon as Ryan moved in, Sarah would resume her methamphetamine use. The two of them would smoke in their bedroom while Kaylee would be in her bedroom or out in the living room watching TV. From the beginning of December 2013, Sarah would begin using methamphetamine every single day again. And unfortunately, when she came down from the meth, she would usually be upset, irritable, or angry. In the same month, Sarah learned that Ryan had a warrant out for his arrest. He now barely left the apartment and would lie to people, including police, about his real name. And since Ryan did not leave the apartment much, Sarah was the one running most of the errands. And she was usually leaving Kaylee with Ryan. Great idea. So it seemed like Sarah was infatuated with Ryan, but his behavior showed that he did not feel the same way about her. And while no one had ever seen Ryan physically abusing Sarah, he was known to be mentally abusive and controlling. So this guy brings 0 to the table. 0. Apparently, Sarah also considered Ryan to be her boyfriend because, well, he was living there and they were sharing a bed at this point every night. So, what else would she think? Well, Ryan did not think that they were a couple. When Ryan moved in, Kaylee also started crying more, and she was now scared to use the bathroom. The apartment had also become a lot more messy and dirty. And Ryan was now preventing Kaylee from seeing her grandparents. And this made her grandparents think that Sarah and Ryan were most likely engaging in illegal drug activity, and in turn putting Kaylee in danger. By January of 2014, Kaylee's grandparents were becoming increasingly worried about the little girl, as they had not seen her since Thanksgiving the year prior. Every time they would try to see Kaylee, Sarah would come up with excuses, usually saying that Kaylee was sick. Other family members who were still seeing Kaylee began to notice bruises on the little girl's body, including at one point a large one on her chin and neck. And when Ryan was asked where this bruise had came from, he said that Kaylee had tripped and fallen into the bathtub. But when Sarah was asked how this bruise occurred, she said that Kaylee had actually tripped over a clothes hamper and then hit it on the floor. Soon, Kaylee started to look pale, tired, and she was often sick and vomiting. So jumping back a month to December of 2013, Sarah decided that she wanted to stop using methamphetamine, and she also did not want the drug in her house any longer. Ryan did not agree with her, and this caused a lot of tension and fighting for the couple. During one of these arguments on January 9th, Ryan slammed Sarah's hand in the door and left it badly injured. Yes, you heard that right. This is the second time now that Sarah has had her hand slammed in a door. Somehow. Then on January 23rd, 2014, Robin, Kaylee's grandmother, would show up at the apartment and demand to see her granddaughter. But she was once again denied, as Sarah told her that Kaylee was sick again. But this time, Robin would call the Napa Police Department to request a welfare check be done on Kaylee. She expressed her concern that Kaylee was under the care of drug addicts and that she was being mistreated. She also told police that Ryan had an outstanding warrant and he might be armed. A police officer named Officer Wade would go out to the apartment where Kaylee lived later that same day, but he would conclude that the situation was unsafe for him and his partner. He didn't call for backup, and he didn't investigate the allegations of child abuse and neglect. Unsafe? He's the effing police. Who else is gonna do it? Also that same day, Robin made numerous attempts to call Child Protective Services to report her concerns about Kaylee's well-being to them. But Robin was told there was nothing they could do, and she needed to call the police instead. Wow. Just wow. Then on January 27th, just a few days later, around 9:40 a.m., police would respond to a noise complaint at Sarah's apartment. Sarah opened the door when the police officers arrived, and before they could even say anything to her, she blurted out, "Is it illegal to argue?" The police would end up leaving that day because they said they saw no signs of domestic violence. Only 2 days later, on January 29th, around 6 p.m., Robin, fearing that Kaylee was in grave danger, once again reached out to the police for assistance. So wimpy Officer Wade, along with another police officer, went out to Sarah's apartment to check on things. When they got there, Sarah tried to keep them from seeing inside the apartment by blocking the door with her body. She did, however, have Kaylee come over to the door, and the officers noted at the time that Kaylee had bruises on her face, appeared gaunt, sick, malnourished, and distressed. But Sarah would say that Kaylee had just fallen off her bike recently, and she had the flu. That's why she looked so bad. While there, officers spoke with Ryan, who gave them the fake name, Ryan Howard. He also looked under the influence of narcotics at the time. And while police were in the apartment still, Kaylee would vomit in front of them. Sarah took her and ran to the bathroom and asked the officers to leave. They complied, without making any effort to speak to Kaylee or to physically examine her, which is the whole reason why her grandmother called in the first place. After the police visit, they discovered that Ryan Howard was actually Ryan Warner, and he had a warrant out for his arrest. But despite this, as well as their observations while at the apartment, police made no effort to get a warrant to re-enter the apartment or to arrest him. Instead, Officer Wade called Robin, Kaylee's grandmother, and told her that Kaylee had food and everything appeared normal at the apartment. He also told her that he would keep an eye on things. Now, had police investigated just a little bit further, they would have realized that Ryan had an extensive criminal history, which included assault and possession of drugs. Ryan had also had a restraining order taken out against him in the past for threatening to kill his pregnant ex-girlfriend, among making other extremely violent threats towards her. 2 days after this welfare check, Robin texted Sarah to see if she and Kaylee could go to lunch with her, but Sarah replied back telling her that they were going to Santa Cruz for the weekend. There was also a friend who had been at Sarah's apartment the day police had gone over to do the welfare check. Prior to the police arriving, Sarah, Ryan, and this friend had been in the bedroom smoking methamphetamine. They had the door closed, and Kaylee was in the living room watching cartoons. At one point, Sarah went out into the living room to check on Kaylee, but she found her in the bathroom drinking from a cup that had Windex and tobacco in it. Sarah yelled to Ryan to get her phone so that she could call poison control. She then went out into the kitchen and began slamming things around. Sarah then went back to Kaylee and tried to get her to drink some water and throw up. She said that that's what she needed to do because poison control had told her that. The next day, January 30th, the friend texted Sarah asking her for another Percocet as she had given him one the night before, but he got no answer. He texted her the next day and did get a response this time. She said, "Hey, sorry, we bounced out of town for a minute. After what happened the other night, we had to get away." In the early afternoon on February 1st, Napa police officer Robert Chambers went to Sarah's apartment in response to a telephone tip that they had received saying that Kaylee was in danger. The officer entered the apartment with a key after no one answered the door. Inside the apartment, in her bed, under blankets, was Kaylee's tiny body. Only her face was visible. It looked bruised and there was blood coming from her nostrils. It appeared that Kaylee had been dead for some time and her skin was ice cold. The apartment was dark, dirty, and disorganized. The curtains were all pulled shut, and there was also extra fabric taped around the windows as well. There were latex gloves also found on the floor. Now, the kitchen was a filthy mess, and police officers noticed that the freezer was completely empty, and A shelving unit had been removed from the freezer. But not surprisingly, Sarah and Ryan were nowhere to be seen. Police would try to ping Sarah's cell phone in order to track the couple, but she had turned off the cell phone, so they were unable to. And that same morning around 9 a.m., a neighbor had seen Sarah and Ryan leaving the apartment complex with a bunch of luggage. The day after, the morning of February 2nd, a woman who was sitting in the lobby of an IHOP restaurant was looking at the news on her cell phone, and she noticed that the two people pictured in the article had just entered the restaurant. But at the same time, Sarah and Ryan had finally turned Sarah's phone back on, and they had seen that police were now looking for them, and they quickly left. Later that morning, the Bay Area Transit Police were alerted that Sarah and Ryan, who were wanted by the Napa Police, were seen at a restaurant that happened to be across from a BART train station. Upon police checking out the station, they found Sarah and Ryan. And when they did, Sarah broke down into tears and told the police officers that she needed to talk to them about something bad that had happened. They were both then arrested. After Kaylee's death, when police spoke with neighbors of Sarah, they said that after Ryan had moved in, they saw Kaylee playing outside a lot less often. And when she did, she would be all alone, when before Sarah would go outside to play with her. Neighbors would also say that Kaylee, in the last months of her life, had many bruises, she looked pale, acted subdued, and recently had a black eye. Neighbors also frequently heard yelling, screaming, and arguments coming from Sarah's apartment. And about a week before Kaylee was found dead, a neighbor heard something large slam into their shared wall. And yet another neighbor of Sarah's said they had been awoken to the slamming of a door in Sarah's apartment multiple times. They had also heard Sarah and Ryan screaming at Kaylee, and they could hear them hitting her on occasion. But they didn't call the police. After her arrest, Sarah would tell police in an interview that on the morning of January 27th, she and Ryan had gotten into an argument. She wanted to get clean off of drugs, and he did not. So Sarah had actually told him to move out. But this infuriated Ryan, and he had thrown a large abalone seashell against the wall. He then pushed Sarah against her bedroom wall and punched the seashell into the wall twice next to Sarah's head. Sarah told police that Ryan had said the only way he was leaving that day is if police came and removed him. And if that happened, he would have his friends from a gang come handle her. This scared her, and she also didn't want Child Protective Services taking Kaylee away, so she did nothing. But police found out that after they had left Sarah's apartment on January 27th, Sarah had taken Kaylee to a friend's house for a few hours and told Ryan to pack his things and get out before she got home. But while she was at the friend's house, she sent Ryan a text message saying, "I really hope you're home when I get there." Are you kidding me? He responded, "I got up, made pancakes for your daughter, put cinnamon rolls in the oven, and you woke up treating me like dog shit for nothing." She replied, "I am so sorry. You do so much for us. I am so sorry. I guess I was just mad because I wanted to cuddle with you last night." What exactly is it that he does for you guys besides make pancakes and cinnamon buns? So needless to say, Sarah and Kaylee had gone back to the apartment with Ryan still there that night. And Sarah had also sent Ryan a text message the following day saying that she really cared for him, and it was clear that he did not feel the same way for her. All she wanted was to feel loved. Sarah then went on to tell police that on the night of January 29th, Kaylee had drinking out of the cup that had contained a few squirts of Windex as well as some tobacco from Ryan cleaning out one of his tobacco pipes. But Sarah said that Kaylee told her that she had actually poured out the dirty water and put clean water in to drink. After that, Kaylee had vomited quite a few times, but Sarah thought it was just because she might have ingested some tobacco. After Kaylee stopped throwing up, she was put to bed, and then Sarah went to bed herself. Police also asked Sarah why she had not called the paramedics when she had found Kaylee drinking from the cup that she believed had poisoned her. Sarah said it was because she and Ryan had been using drugs that day. At the time Kaylee drank the liquid, Sarah was coming back to her senses from the methamphetamine use. And she wanted to call poison control, but Ryan told her that Kaylee was throwing up, which is what she needed to do, so they didn't have to call. But when Sarah woke up the next afternoon on January 30th, She couldn't find Kaylee in her room. She did, however, find her laying on the bathroom floor. And when Sarah went over to pick up her daughter, she was stiff and not breathing. There was also a bruise on Kaylee's buttocks that Sarah had not previously seen. Sarah started screaming that Kaylee was dead. Ryan came into the room and grabbed the little girl out of Sarah's arms. He then started shaking Kaylee and poking her in the stomach and saying, "Look, she's breathing, she's breathing." Sarah told Ryan to stop and give her daughter back to her, which he did. She then told Ryan he needed to call 911, but Ryan said he needed 10 minutes to gather himself or to come up with a story. He then took Kaylee's lifeless body and put her back in her bed. Since Ryan wasn't calling 911, Sarah asked him for her phone, as he had it at the time. But he told her that she couldn't call 911 because they would think that he had done something to Kaylee due to the bruise on her buttocks. He said that the day before, Kaylee had gotten out of her timeout and he had spanked her. He said he didn't think he had spanked her hard, but apparently he had. Sarah told Ryan spanking would not have killed a child, and she thought that it was probably from Kaylee drinking out of the Windex and tobacco cup. For the rest of that afternoon and the following day, Sarah said she went in and out of Kaylee's bedroom to be with her. And Ryan would keep saying that he didn't want to get in trouble for something he didn't do. So Sarah told him that he could run, and after he left, she would call the police. But he didn't. That night, Ryan's friend Antonio, along with Antonio's brother, went by Sarah's apartment. Sarah told police that Antonio was a high-ranking gang member, and she was scared of him. Apparently, Ryan had asked Antonio and his brother to help them with their situation, but Antonio wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, he didn't even know what the situation was until he had gotten to the apartment. But when Antonio had found out that little Kaylee was dead, he told the couple he couldn't help them. They needed to call the police, to which Sarah promised she would, but clearly did not. After the men left in the early morning hours on February 1st, Sarah said that she was going to call the police, and Ryan had actually put Kaylee's body into the freezer in the kitchen to preserve evidence. Sarah thinks around that time she passed out and didn't realize that Kaylee's body was in the freezer till about 3 hours later when she came back to. At that time, she said she took her out of the freezer and put the little girl back in her bed and surrounded her with pillows, blankets, toys, and books. After that, Sarah and Ryan had gone back to sleep again for a few hours. When they woke up, they decided it was now time to leave. So they left the apartment and headed to a nearby GameStop where they tried to sell a PlayStation 3 for money. When they were unsuccessful there, the couple went and sold it to a friend in exchange for a ride to Vallejo, where they then got a bus to San Francisco. Here, Ryan and Sarah said they walked around, then went to a church to pray and ask a pastor to help them call the police. But the church was closed, so they pretty much said, fuck it, let's flee instead. And they went to San Francisco International Airport. They ended up staying the night at the airport, and for one reason or another, I'm guessing they probably didn't have enough money. The couple then left the airport. After that, they headed to the IHOP where they had been spotted. And once they realized that they were wanted, the couple had walked across the street to the BART train station and were about to get on the train when police found them. And when police asked Sarah about Kaylee's bruising that had been spotted on the little girl's body weeks prior to her death, Sarah again gave them the story about Kaylee falling off her bicycle. Sarah told police that at one point, Kaylee had a black eye, which they already knew. And she said that Ryan had told her that the two had bumped heads when Kaylee jumped up to try to give him a hug. Sarah was not present at the time, and she had no reason to not believe him. She said she had never seen Ryan put his hands on Kaylee, except for a few times that he had spanked her. But Sarah had told him to not do that, and Ryan promised to never do it again. And Sarah said that Ryan would get angry quite often, but he would not get physical. That is, except for that one time that he had gotten angry and slammed her hand in a door. But she said she didn't know if he had done that on purpose or not. During the last couple of weeks of Kaylee's life, Sarah said that her daughter and Ryan had gotten along well. Kaylee would sit on the couch with him and hug him, but sometimes Ryan would get mad at her for holding her bowels. first, Sarah thought it was odd that he was getting so upset about this and bringing her to the bathroom every time. But she would end up being okay with it because she said that she heard Kaylee telling Ryan that she loved him and wanted him to be her dad. I don't know about that. When Sarah had first found Kaylee dead, her first thought was that she didn't pour out what was in the cup and that she had drank the stuff in there and had been poisoned. But the autopsy of Kaylee proved that Sarah's theory was far from the truth. Kaylee had 41 external injuries to her body. There were numerous blunt force injuries along with many large bruises to her abdomen and on her back and buttocks. There were also external injuries to her arms, forearms, thighs, legs, and knees, as well as bruises on her forehead, cheek, and under her chin, as well as internal injuries to her scalp. Kaylee also had a healing broken rib, which looked like it occurred a few weeks prior to her death. And on top of that, Kaylee had a 12-inch segment of her intestine that was dead, which had resulted in a rupture of her intestine wall. And there was also a blunt force injury near her spine. The extent of injuries on Kaylee's body were a result of repeated episodes of major blunt force trauma. They were consistent with beating, not spanking or falling from a bike. During the autopsy, there was also no sign of constipation, abdominal disease, or spontaneous rupture found. Kaylee was also found to be dehydrated and slightly malnourished. Her cause of death was abdominal trauma, and as a result, the intestinal tissue had died and became perforated, spilling the contents into Kaylee's stomach, which resulted in sepsis and then death. 23-year-old Sarah Kruger and her 26-year-old boyfriend Ryan Warner were charged with murder and felony assault of a child resulting in death. Upon inspection of Sarah's internet history, it was found that on January 25th, there was a search for an article to the effect of a woman booked or jailed on suspicion of child abuse. On January 31st, after Kaylee's death, there was a search for U.S. cities with the highest populations. During Ryan Warner's interrogation, he admitted that he had frozen Kaylee's body after they had found her on the bathroom floor unresponsive. He said that he had wrapped Kaylee in a plastic bag and then put her into a suitcase and then into the freezer. He said she had been there for about 6 hours before Sarah had woken up, panicked, and taken her out. Though Sarah had said 3 hours, so it was sometime between 3 and 6 hours. He told police that before they had fled the apartment, Sarah had tucked Kaylee's tiny body into bed, placed toys, pillows, and blankets around her, and then read her a bedtime story. In November of 2015, the Napa County District Attorney additionally charged Sarah and Ryan with 2 counts of murder, this time with the special circumstance of torture and assault resulting in the death of a child under the age of 8. In May of 2017, both Ryan and Sarah would go to trial. The prosecution believed that Kaylee's murder was by torture and that Sarah directly committed the crimes or aided and abetted Ryan in committing them. Video surveillance footage from the San Francisco International Airport was shown to the jury, and in it, Sarah and Ryan were seen on an airport tram at about 11:15 p.m. on February 1st. Sarah is seen talking and laughing with Ryan in the video. She appears calm and was even resting her head on Ryan's shoulder and trying to snuggle with him. There was also additional security footage obtained from a Target that was near the couple's apartment. On the afternoon of January 31st, the day after Kaylee was believed to have died, the couple was seen in Target buying ice cream. And of course, they again looked happy and like they had no concerns. And another interesting thing is that Sarah's medical records showed that she was treated for a hand injury on January 9th. Here, she told medical personnel that her boyfriend had accidentally slammed her hand in a door. She was also seen for a hand injury the next day on January 10th at a different hospital. This time, she said that it was a friend who had slammed her hand in the door. So maybe she was looking for drugs. And although Sarah had told a detective during her interview that she had been in and out of Kaylee's bedroom on January 30th and 31st, she testified during the trial that Ryan actually would not let her into Kaylee's room until after she had already taken her body out of the freezer. Sarah would also tell the court that she had only ever spanked her daughter 3 or 4 times in her life. She also said that she did not yell at Kaylee during the last week of her life, except once on January 29th, when she was sitting on the couch with Kaylee, trying to get her to eat a Pedialyte popsicle to rehydrate her. But Kaylee was refusing it. So she had punished her, and eventually Kaylee would end up eating some of the Pedialyte popsicle. Sarah said, though, that she was not concerned that her daughter was gravely ill, and she was just worried that her daughter was dehydrated. But she did think that it was odd that Kaylee refused a popsicle, because she never did. Sarah would also reveal that Child Protective Services had actually been in her and Kaylee's life from the time that Kaylee was about 5 months old until the time that she was 2. Sarah also said that when Jason had gone to prison for an incident that occurred when he had come to her apartment, grabbed her arm and twisted it, she had told her CPS worker that she lied to police and that Jason had not assaulted her as she had said, but had been jumped by gang members. She then admitted at trial that what she had told CPS was a lie. The truth was that she had fought back when Jason had assaulted her, and she had left marks on him. And both she and Jason were concerned that they could get in trouble with CPS and that Kaylee would be taken away and put into state custody. A doctor diagnosed Sarah with PTSD with depressive symptoms and said that Sarah had experienced multiple traumatic events in her life, and that the trauma of finding Kaylee dead had caused Sarah to go into a dissociative state. The doctor believed that the dissociation was prevalent for the first few days after Kaylee's death and intermittent from there on. But a psychiatrist testified that while there was a history of abuse with Jason that impaired Sarah's reasoning and judgment, she did not have that same kind of history with Ryan. And there was no evidence that her relationship with Ryan had affected her in the way that her relationship with Jason had. And since being in custody, Sarah had described to a doctor a dissociative episode that lasted 3 months after the discovery of Kaylee's body, but the doctor did not believe it. Rather, based on her actions and appearance in the security camera footage, as well as her recall of details when she was interviewed, were not consistent with dissociation. The jury ended up finding Ryan Warner guilty of both murder with a special circumstance of torture, as well as assault, resulting in the death of a child under 8 years old. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury found Sarah Kruger guilty of the same, and she was also given the same sentence, life in prison without parole. In January of 2021, both Sarah and Ryan had challenged their convictions and sentences, saying that there was not enough evidence presented to prove that they had intentionally killed Kaylee. An appeals court had ruled that the large bruises found on Kaylee's body proved intent to harm, but not intent to kill. The appeals court also saw Sarah's gesture of giving Kaylee a Pedialyte popsicle evidence that she wanted to rehydrate her daughter and not kill her. The Napa County District Attorney disagreed with the appeal court's findings that Kaylee was not murdered intentionally, saying, "If not intent to kill, then why beat your baby so badly that you rupture her intestine? If not intent to kill, then why not call a doctor when your baby is screaming in pain, as evidenced by the testimony of neighbors? If not intent to kill, then why not call an ambulance when you found her lifeless body on the floor?" I fully support the unanimous verdicts of 24 Napa County jurors who had the courage and common sense to call abject cruelty what it was. But based on those facts, the court would actually find that the evidence presented at trial was not enough to prove that they had intentionally killed Kaylee. This resulted in a reversal of their special circumstances charges, and they will both be resentenced at a future date. In May of 2015, Kaylee's father and grandparents, Robin and Benny Slusher, had filed a lawsuit against the city and county in federal court. They alleged that the Napa Police Department and child welfare service workers did not properly investigate allegations that Kaylee was being abused and neglected. And it wouldn't be until 4 years later that the lawsuit was finally settled for $5 million. Kaylee's father was given $2.5 million, and the grandparents were given the other $2.5 million. Shortly after Kaylee's death, neighbors, community members, family, and friends held a candlelight vigil for her, as well as set up a memorial with flowers, stuffed animals, and balloons in front of the apartment where she had once lived. A private funeral was held for Kaylee, and she was buried in Tuluke Cemetery in Napa County. Kaylee's aunt also raised funds to have a bench put in at Napa's Camille Park in remembrance of her beautiful niece. Well, thank you for listening to all of Kaylee's story today. This poor little girl never really had a stable life, but before Ryan came along, she seemed happy. After that, in her mother's eyes, it was Ryan and drugs that came first, not her daughter. And to think she died in such a painful and brutal way, all while her mother let it happen. Dylan Scanlon was born on October 1st, 2016, to his mother, Claire Scanlon, and his father, Gary Keenan. He also had an older brother named Sean Keenan. Dylan was a happy, funny, and cheeky little boy who was full of excitement, especially about doing new things. He also loved going to school and playing outside at either the park or by the lake. Dylan's parents, Claire and Gary, had met in 2005, and shortly after, Gary would take on her older son, Sean, as his own. But in 2014, Claire's mother, whom she took care of full-time, died from Huntington's disease, which is a degenerative and genetic condition. It can cause problems with uncontrolled movements, emotions, behavior, and thinking. Claire was beside herself. Following her mother's death, things changed for Claire. Struggling to cope with her loss, she was prescribed the medication mirtazapine for depression and anxiety. 2 years after that, she would fall pregnant with Dylan and give birth to him in October of 2016. For some reason, however, Gary, his father, was never put on his birth certificate. And around the same time that Dylan was born, Claire began to experience the same symptoms of the disease that had killed her mother. Claire's speech, her ability to walk, as well as her reaction time had slowed. And due to this, her mental health took yet another hit. In 2020, Claire and Gary's relationship had begun to break down. Claire would accuse Gary of being an alcoholic who had anger issues. And eventually, Gary would end up moving out of the home that he shared with Claire and their 2 sons. This was sometime between Christmas and New Year's Eve of 2020. Claire did not handle this breakup very well at all, and she became very bitter towards her ex. She began losing weight, not taking care of herself, and leaving the house a lot less often. And since her anxiety and depression was clearly getting worse, her doctor increased her dosage on her mirtazapine prescription. Dylan's mother, Claire, had also become obsessed with trying to get Gary back, and she would text him multiple times a day, as well as leave voicemail after voicemail for him. Then, in September of 2021, Claire found out that Gary was seeing a new woman. This only made her send him text messages more frequently, and they started to become abusive. Gary had been trying to see his son Dylan for quite some time, and even though Claire would tell him that she was struggling to deal with him on her own, she still wouldn't let Gary spend time with his own son. That is, unless it was convenient for her at the time. And Claire had also left Gary a voicemail saying that she was struggling emotionally and financially ever since he had left her. But Gary said at that point he was actually providing financial support for their son. So, tired of not being able to see Dylan, Gary began working with a solicitor, who then sent 2 letters to Claire at the end of 2021. These letters were only attempts for Gary to be able to see Dylan, but they only made Claire even more angry and upset with him. And it wasn't just Gary that Claire wouldn't let see Dylan. She wouldn't accept help from anybody. She even stopped answering her phone and the door if anybody came by. Now, Sean, Claire's older son, would say that his mother had become mental and that his younger brother Dylan had become her coping strategy. He said that ever since his father Gary had left, Dylan had become Claire's reason for getting out of bed every morning. So Sean had noticed that his little brother was getting caught up in the middle of this mess, and his mother Claire wanted him to choose between his father and her. Sean was completely sick of it, so he texted his mother saying, Dylan should get to see both of his parents. If Gary didn't care about me and Dylan, he wouldn't have raised me. I'm not deciding between anyone. You're my mom, Gary's my dad, and Dylan is my brother. I want Dylan to have his mom and dad. Claire then later messaged Sean saying, him or us. Sean replied back, you just want Gary. You don't care about me or Dylan. And sadly, I think that's true. Sean had previously lived with Dylan and Claire in the home they shared on Elm Road in Limeside. However, sometime around October of 2021, he had moved out and into a flat with his girlfriend. Another part of the reason that Sean had moved out was because him and his mother had been at odds for months at that point. He, of course, still wanted to be there for his brother Dylan, though, so at Christmas time, he stopped by to bring over some presents. But Claire would not allow him into the home, and Sean had to leave the presents across the street at his uncle's house. Starting in November of 2021, Claire's messages to Dylan's father, Gary, became rather concerning. In one voicemail she left him, she said, "Dylan's not leaving the house no more. I'm at my wit's end. I'm not carrying on like this." In a later message, she said, "We don't need you. He's done a year without you, and he's doing the rest of his life without you." And at the end of one particular voicemail that Claire left for Gary, Dylan's little voice can be heard saying, "Bye, Gary." And then Claire was heard telling her son, "He picked a girl over you." That's real nice. Then there was a voicemail she left for Gary in mid-December talking about their son Dylan, saying, "I promise you, you won't see him again. You'll see. Bye. Go and enjoy your life." At that point, I would have called the authorities personally. On Christmas Eve, Claire sent him another text message saying, "I've done this for a year, struggling on my own. I'm empty. I can't live much longer." And days later, on December 27th, Claire left him another message in which she said, "I promise you now, carrying on treating me like a knobhead, I promise you're never going to see my son again." And in another message, "Treat me like a dick and I'll stop you from seeing him." And again, a few days after that, on December 30th, she sent Gary another concerning text, and this one said, "You're just showing all you want to do is act like me and Dill were not in your life. And crack on, make a new life with your new bird. So you go and do that. I'll solve it for you. Go and enjoy your new life with her. And remember, you chose your slag, which is slang for slut." And then the next day, around 6:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve, Gary received another phone call from Claire. This time, he picked up, and she sounded more panicked than she had ever sounded before. Claire told him that Dylan had had an accident, and now his lips were blue and he wasn't breathing. Extremely concerned, Gary asked her if she had called the paramedics yet, but she told him that she hadn't. He told her she needed to immediately hang up and call them. He then got into his car and drove straight to Claire's house. Meanwhile, after Claire had hung up with Gary, she didn't immediately call for help. Instead, she ran across the street to her uncle's house. And she was so frantic that her uncle's partner, Joanne Wild, would be the one who ended up calling 999. After Claire had told her family there was something seriously wrong with Dylan, they all ran over to her house. And there they found him, lifeless in his bed with a significant amount of bruising to his head and body. Claire explained to them that a ladder had just fallen on top of Dylan. By the time that Dylan's father had arrived, the police were already there and he was not allowed inside the home. So Sean, who had also already arrived on the scene, would be the one who had to tell him that his son, Dylan, had not made it. The paramedics had declared Dylan as dead almost as soon as they had gotten there, because rigor mortis had already started to set in. And even though Claire had told her family that a ladder had fallen on top of Dylan, she told the paramedics a different story. She told them that Dylan had actually fallen down some stairs the day prior. She said that ever since he had fallen, she had been checking on him periodically, but he seemed fine. She also claimed that 20 minutes prior to her finding him unresponsive, he was running around the house, playing with the dog, and yelling, which is probably impossible since rigor mortis had already started to set in. A post-mortem examination found that Dylan had 64 separate injuries on his head and body. His numerous bruises had been sustained within days of his death, and they all looked to be non-accidental. However, these injuries would not have been substantial enough to have caused Dylan's death. When Dylan's toxicology report came back, it revealed that at the time he had died, he actually had 9 times the lethal dose of mirtazapine inside his system, which is the antidepressant that Claire had been prescribed. It, however, could not be said when the antidepressants were given to him or how many were given to him. But given the dosage, I would say that there were at least 10, if not more, pills. Claire had told multiple people that she had stopped taking her prescription about 4 to 5 months prior to Dylan's death. However, she had gone to pick up a prescription for it just 11 days prior to Dylan dying, which would have been December 20th. That was around the time that she had left the voicemail for Gary, telling him that he would never see his son again. Claire had been arrested at the scene after police and paramedics had become suspicious about how Dylan had actually died. And as Claire was being put into the police vehicle, she told an officer, "Please don't put me in a cell. I have anxiety and can't deal with a cell." Maybe that's something you should have thought about a little bit sooner, before you killed Dylan. Claire and Dylan's family did not know how it had come to this. They thought that Claire always adored her son, and he had been her reason for living. Once Claire was brought down to the police station, they obtained a blood sample from her, and it was discovered that she had mirtazapine in her system as well, however, only in a therapeutic dose. She was then assessed and found to be displaying psychotic symptoms. So Claire was sent to Edenfield Center in Prestwich for mental health treatment, where she would spend approximately 2 months. While she was being treated at Edenfield Center, Claire would actually tell 2 workers that she had been the one that killed her son Dylan. One worker said that she had told him she was holding Dylan when she had gone up into the attic to do something. She then said Dylan wiggled in her arms, which had caused her to drop him. He fell down the ladder that led up to the attic and landed at the bottom. But Claire told the worker that instead of going down to check on her son immediately, because that's a big fall, she continued to do what she was doing up in the attic. And when she was done, then she went to check on Dylan. However, he was not breathing when she finally got to him. So she said she picked him up and put him in his bed to keep him warm. I don't know why you would do that. Why wouldn't you call 911 immediately? And another worker at Edenfield Center said that on February 19th, she also had an interaction with Claire. While the worker had been monitoring the common area where the patients were, she saw Claire sitting in the corner of the room, looking out the window at the snow that was falling. Suddenly, Claire became very upset, so the worker helped her back to her room. Once back in her room, the worker asked Claire what was bothering her, to which Claire said, "I killed my child. I killed my baby." And during the time that she was being held in the hospital, on March 5th, 2022, Claire decided to call up Gary. As soon as he picked up the phone, she said to him, "This is all your fucking fault." He reminded her that he had a restraining order out against her and she shouldn't be calling him. Claire immediately hung up the phone after that. Following Claire's arrest and Dylan's death, police had searched the home, and they had found empty boxes of mirtazapine in the kitchen trash can. They had also found a handwritten note in Claire's bedside drawer and a black trash bag full of Dylan's baby photos. The note that police had found suggested that Claire had actually intended on taking both her and Dylan's lives that day. It read, "Don't let them see us, just cremate us. This all could have been avoided if his family and Gary had just left us alone." Also, during police's investigation, it was discovered that Dylan had been known to social services for years. But a care plan and further intervention had never been deemed as necessary. In late 2020, a concerned neighbor had actually called social services, saying that Dylan looked rather gray and gaunt. He looked like he was being starved, she said. In fact, many of the neighbors said that they had noticed a change in Dylan once Gary had left the home. Then, in June of 2021, another neighbor tipped off police saying that Dylan was possibly not being well cared for. They also said that the family's garden was overrun with rats and trash, and they hadn't seen Dylan playing outside all spring or summer. Authorities had then emailed social services to tell them about their concerns, but it's unclear if any action at all was taken. The last time that Dylan had been seen by his neighbors was the day prior to his death. He had actually been going to the corner store with his mother, and there were no signs that he had been hurt at that point. One of Claire's neighbors said that in the early hours on December 31st, she was in her back bedroom, and she heard a murmur of voices coming through the wall that she shared with Claire. She believed the voices were those of Dylan and Claire, and that Dylan had possibly just woken up in the middle of the night, and Claire was getting him back to bed. She said the murmurs lasted for 3 to 5 minutes, and then after that, she heard nothing more. Other neighbors who spoke with police after Dylan's death told them that they only ever heard screaming and arguing coming from the house, though it had gotten to be a little bit less after Gary left. They also said that Claire used to say hi to them and hold friendly conversations, but recently she had been staying in the house, and when she did need to go out to go somewhere, she kept her head down and tried to avoid making eye contact with any of her neighbors. Now, even though Claire had been sent to a hospital for mental health treatment, she was still deemed fit to stand trial, and on June 13, 2023, that trial began. The prosecution believed that Claire had taken the ultimate step in her anger to take Dylan away from his father for good. She had deliberately fed him the drug that had killed him. And in her anger, she had beat Dylan with sufficient enough force to bruise muscles on both sides of his head, as well as across his face. While giving evidence in the witness box, Claire was hidden from the public view. She was only seen by jurors, barristers, and the judge. During her first day on the stand, Claire denied ever hurting her son and was sticking to her story that he had just fallen down a few stairs. The court also heard how Claire had picked up a prescription for 56 tablets of mirtazapine in November and then again in December, even though she had claimed that she had stopped taking it months prior. This medication was only to be taken once a day, but by December 31st, Claire said she did not know how many pills she had left. The mother would also say that on the day Dylan died, she had found him to be a bit off, but she had not been the one to give him the antidepressants. She said she had also noticed that her son had a black eye, though she didn't know where it came from, and she said for this, she did give him some Calpol. For the most part, Claire mumbled and lied her way through the entire trial, saying, "I don't remember," to most of the questions she was asked. Claire did, however, remember that her uncle's partner, Joanne Wilder's granddaughter, returned to her house with her and had found Dylan unresponsive. Claire had then asked her to carry Dylan downstairs while she went into the bathroom and changed her clothes. The 38-year-old then said she did not remember emergency services arriving, but she did remember that she went to sort out a bag for her and Dylan because she thought they were just going to the hospital. Claire then alleged that she had no memory of anything that happened at the police station following her arrest, or her first month at Edenfield Hospital, where she was subsequently taken. She did, however, say she remembered when one staff member at Edenfield told her that Dylan's funeral had taken place, and upon hearing it, she had broke down crying. When she was questioned about the threatening text messages that she had sent to Gary in the weeks leading up to Dylan's death, Claire denied that she had ever told Gary he would never see his son again, or that she had ever threatened him, saying that she would harm herself. When the text message that she had sent to Gary on Christmas Eve saying that she was empty and couldn't live much longer was read out loud in court, she said that it meant nothing. She denied that she was planning on doing serious harm to either herself or Dylan, and that the note that police had previously found had been a note she had written when Gary had left over a year ago. But that would mean you were planning on killing yourself and Dylan back then? So either way, you were planning his murder. Doesn't look good. So even though Claire was claiming ignorance and could barely remember a thing, the fact of the matter is that she would have had to pop out each and every single tablet of the mirtazapine individually. And for the level that had been found in Dylan's body, there had to have been at least 10 pills that were popped out of the packet, if not more, which means there was definitely some premeditation to her son's death. Gary Keenan would also testify in court, and he would say that his relationship with Claire had always had its ups and downs. But throughout their 15-year relationship, Claire had always had a problem with his family. He also told the jury that it had been a long time since he had last seen his son. It had been on September 31st, 2021, the day before Dylan's 5th birthday. A couple months after that, in December, Gary had asked Claire if he could stop by to give his son his Christmas presents, but she had denied it. And outside of court, Gary would later say that giving away his son's Christmas presents to a kid of similar age was one of the hardest things he ever had to do. Gary believed that Claire had often been difficult about letting him see his son because what she really wanted was for the two of them to be back together so they could all be a family again. But Gary didn't want any of that. He just wanted to see Dylan, and that was that. Following Gary giving evidence, Claire's father, Michael Scanlon, took the stand. He said that since Claire had been arrested, she had called him many times from jail. During one phone call, he said that Claire had told him that she had tried to end her own life when she had killed Dylan. She said that she had also taken too many pills, but clearly it wasn't enough because she had woken up again. But when she got to the police station and they drew her blood, hours later, she only had a therapeutic dose in her system, so not sure if I believe that one. Claire also claimed that she didn't remember making any of these phone calls to her father, even though, as he said, they were pretty consistent ever since she had been arrested. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and during closing statements, the defense told the jury that there was no evidence as to how the medication had gotten into Dylan's system. They also didn't know if the tablets had been crushed or put into a drink, or if Dylan had just taken them on his own. But he wouldn't have been able to punch them out of the packet, and there was only one adult in the house. So you do the math. Claire's defense lawyer said, "There is nothing to say that Dylan was forced to take the tablets. There is nothing to tell you how they got in his system. Never once, not even in the note that Claire had left in her home, did she admit to actually giving the pills to Dylan." And the defense ran with that. The defense also wanted the jury to see Claire not as somebody who was angry, but rather as somebody who was just struggling with her Huntington's disease as well as her depression and anxiety. However, around the time of Dylan's death, Claire was constantly carrying out acts such as bringing Dylan back and forth to school, feeding him, interacting with Gary's solicitor, going food shopping, and shopping online. So she was capable of restraining herself from killing her son as well. Ultimately, Claire was found guilty of murder. However, when it came time for her sentencing hearing, Claire refused to show up, kind of like Adam Montgomery. She was still, however, given a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years. And Gary Keenan would say about his son, "He was a happy, adventurous, cheeky little boy who loved life. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that Claire would hurt Dylan. I don't think I will ever be the same person again. Every happy event is now tinged with sadness. Because Dylan is not here, I cannot sleep at night. I hold a lot of guilt because sometimes I think I should never have left." And Dylan's big brother Sean, who was at that point in his 20s, said, "Dylan is a much-loved and missed brother. A young boy of 5 whose life was stolen from him for no reason. In tragic and extreme circumstances. My final words are, Mum, I'm sure you're sorry for the hurt you've caused to us all, and I love you, because you are my mom, but I don't want you to hurt anyone else." He continued, "You know Dylan will never get the chance to go on holiday, have a career, or have a family. You know that you will never know the man that he would have become, because that was taken away from him by you." And soon after Dylan's death, members of the community, family, and friends stopped by the flat where he had once lived to leave balloons, flowers, toys, and stuffed animals, all in remembrance of the bright, happy, silly 5-year-old. Well, thank you for listening to Dylan's story today. I might believe that due to Claire's illness, she had forgotten that she had taken the pills out of the packet and Dylan had accidentally ingested them on his own, had he not also had bruising all over his body. It's like nothing mattered to Claire after her boyfriend, Dylan's father, had left her, not even her own children. And it makes me wonder if her abuse towards Dylan had started right after that, since there were some neighbors that had seen him looking gray and gaunt, and then he was not seen outside for months on end. But if so, how did her family, some of whom lived right across the street, not notice any signs of it? There's definitely more to the story here. Because also, why would Gary not have called the authorities, knowing how erratic Claire had been acting, when she sent him the message saying he was never going to see his son again?
Base of the bed, like there's a bit of timber, and she's hit her head on that. Okay, and that's when you say that you did what? You took her in the shower then?
Yes, I've been trying to wake her up. I got the cold water on and trying to wake her up, and she wouldn't.
Kaisha Louise Whippert was born on April 22, 2004, to her mother, Christy Abrahams, and her father, Chris Whippert. She was a happy, sweet, and bubbly little girl. She loved cats, Hannah Montana, butterflies, and her favorite color was purple. 6-year-old Kaisha lived with her mother, Christy, stepfather, Robert Smith, and 2 siblings at their apartment located on Woodstock Ave in Mount Druitt, Sydney, Australia. On the morning of Sunday, August 1st, 2010, Christy awoke to find that her daughter was missing from her bed. The front door of their home was also ajar, though it showed no sign of forced entry. The mother said that she had last seen Kaisha when she put her to bed the night prior, around 9:30. The little girl had been wearing pink pajamas and a purple pumpkin patch jacket. Christy speculated that her daughter was also likely barefoot. She additionally told police that she had left the front door unlocked the night before, and Kaisha's room was just feet away from it.
Hi, I've just gotten up and I went to the toilet and realised that my front door was open and my daughter's not here.
You just get the police on their way out there, okay? How old is your daughter?
She's 6.
She's 6?
Yes.
Have you checked all the units?
No, I've just gotten up.
Okay, what's your name?
Christy, I'm her mum.
Okay, Christy, what's your last name?
Abraham.
What's your daughter's name?
Kaisha.
What is it?
Kaisha.
Spell it.
Kaisha.
Yep. Okay, so she, as far as you know, she would be in her pajamas, or you don't know?
Yes, she's in her pajamas.
Okay. So what time would you have last seen her? Last night?
I put her to bed at 9:30, 9:45.
And do you have any other family that live in the unit block?
No.
Any neighbours that she would talk to?
No.
Let's just let the police know. We've got police. We've got everybody on their way out to see you, okay?
Yeah.
And she's never done this?
No, like she gets up and plays, like in the middle of the night. She looks out. I recorded her out her window before we went over, but I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. And is it just the two of you that live there?
I've got a 2-year-old and a 3-week-old baby.
And are they still there?
Yeah, they're still here.
They're still there?
Yes. And the kid's father, he's here as well.
He's there as well?
Looking for her.
Okay. Now, Christy, we have got everybody on their way out there.
Yeah.
So he's out yelling the streets for her?
Yeah, he's going looking for her.
What's his name?
Robert.
Robert?
Yeah, Robert.
Robert who?
Smith.
And you've looked in all the cupboards?
Yeah, he's not here. I looked everywhere.
It wasn't long until close to 40 police officers and more than 100 volunteers began searching for the 6-year-old. They looked everywhere, including bushlands and drain pipes in the nearby suburb of Bidwell. Kaisha's extended family reported that it was unusual for her to wander off on her own. However, they also speculated that maybe she had left the house to play with some stray cats that lived close by, and in that time, she had been abducted. Now, authorities also wanted to speak with Kaisha's biological father, Chris, who lived not too far away. He was adamant that while he paid child support, he had not seen his daughter in years, and he had nothing to do with her disappearance. When an officer later told the father that a witness had placed him near Christy's apartment on the morning that Kaisha went missing, he denied it and said that he had not left the house as he was still recovering from major foot surgery he had a few weeks prior. Community members would hold a candlelight vigil for Kaisha, and a memorial of stuffed animals, candles, and flowers quickly formed outside her home. Everyone was hopeful that the 6-year-old would be found safe. 2 days after she went missing, her mother Christy and her stepfather Robert made an appeal for anyone with information in regards to Kaisha's whereabouts to please come forward to authorities.
If there's anyone out there that knows or seen anything, just come forward, contact the police. It's really cool. seek help.
Rob, do you want to talk us through the last time you saw Kaisha?
Last time I saw her, we were watching a movie together, you know. Anyone, someone must know something. Please come forward.
What kind of personality does she have?
She's beautiful, you know, funny, always happy.
Was that on Saturday? You were watching the movie?
The last movie we watched was The Golden Compass.
Rob, how have the past 48 hours been for you and Christy?
Can't describe how it's been. You don't know until you put yourself in my shoes. Just hope that she's found as soon as possible. That's what we need. Safe and well.
How hard is it for you the longer this goes?
It gets harder by the minute.
Rob, we've all seen such beautiful pictures of your little girl. Can you tell us a little bit about her, what she's like? You know, what as parents you really like about her?
She's always happy, bubbly, you know, loved playing, you know, just like any kid would.
Rob, do you have any idea that anyone who you might know who may have taken Christy, does the family obviously thought about long and hard about this? Does anyone have any idea?
I have no idea. If I had any idea, mate, we'd be there looking.
The police have expressed hope. Obviously everyone is hopeful, and that's one thing you've got to hold on to.
We definitely are hopeful.
Yeah.
We all love her and we all miss her, and if she can hear or see it, get to a phone or ring the police. We want her to come back safely.
Do anything in your power to please come back home.
They'd kept her Christmas presents and other toys ready in a spare room, waiting for her to come home, even showing some of the gifts they'd hung onto from the memorial set up at the old unit.
It wasn't long until police confirmed that Christy and Robert had been the only ones who had seen Kaisha in the 3 weeks leading up to her disappearance. The rest of her family had not seen her since July 7th. Additionally, the little girl had not been to school in quite some time. According to neighbors, the reason why Kaisha hadn't gone to school in a bit was because her mother, Christy, had just recently had a new baby. Personally, I think that a new baby would be even more reason to send your older child to school, so you're not overwhelmed trying to care for both of them, and you can spend some quality time with your newborn. Weeks passed, and Kaisha still hadn't been found. Strangely, her mother, Christy, and her stepfather, Robert, were not participating in the searches for her. Due to this and the fact that Christy appeared to be carrying on with her life as normal, she was seen out shopping and regularly getting her hair and nails done. People began to criticize her. But even though many were incredibly skeptical of the mother and stepfather, authorities did not have enough evidence to prove that they had been involved in Kaisha's disappearance. As the investigation into Kaisha's whereabouts continued and public pressure against Christy and Robert mounted, the couple moved into a nearby motel. They also began having their friend and neighbor, Allison Anderson, act as their spokesperson, proclaiming their innocence. In a statement, Allison said, "The family wished to deny the recent allegations in the media. The family encouraged the public to come forward with any information that may assist police in finding Kaisha. But please stop making baseless allegations. The family wished to be left alone to deal with this situation." Allison would also help the couple move out of their apartment, and when she went into Kaisha's room, she noticed that there was nothing belonging to the little girl in there. Also during this time, Christy found a sweater that belonged to her daughter, and she became very upset, swore, and kicked it away. Then, months after the little girl went missing, police made a disturbing announcement. On January 31st, 2011, they notified the public that they believed that Kaisha was no longer alive. Detectives had found that the 6-year-old's blood was located in every single room of the apartment where she'd lived. When Christy was then brought down to the police station and questioned about this, she feigned ignorance.
Would there be any reason why there'd be more blood, not just in her unit, but throughout the unit?
What are you trying to say?
I'm just saying that when we forensically examined the unit, there's an amount of Kaisha's blood throughout the unit. And I'm just trying to ask you how that would have got there.
I don't know.
No? Okay.
We're talking about the park around in Woodstock?
Yes, right next door.
Right next door.
Yes.
Okay, so for Robert to end up in Westville at Mount Druitt, is that unusual?
What do you mean?
Well, Robert's, when he's left your unit, he's gone into Westville, all the way to Westfield, and looked inside Westfield.
Like he's looked all the way where we walked down to Westfields.
Yeah, but you don't take her to the shops.
I do.
No, I've been through a whole week of her life, and she hasn't left the unit.
So what are you trying to say?
No, what I'm trying to say is, why did he end up down in Mount Druitt shopping centre?
But he looked all around, and to go to Mount Druitt.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that you don't take her shopping. Why would she go there? She's never been there, has she?
She has. Maybe not the week that you're talking about. Oh, you know what? This is over, seriously, because what are you trying to get at?
All right, I'll move on. All I'm saying is, that Robert, why did he go to Westfield? That's all I'm asking. It's a simple
So have
question.
a look. You would have seen, you would have got the CT.
But it's a long way from where you are, that's all. We're just trying to get to the bottom of this. You're very angry.
Yeah, well.
At us. We're going to get to the bottom of what's happened to her.
Yeah, I hope you do, because, mate, I need to know.
I think everybody needs to know.
So what are you trying to say, that we did something to her? Or?
I didn't say that.
Then finally, on April 22nd, 2011, what would have been Kaisha's 7th birthday, 2 people were arrested and charged with her murder. These people were, of course, her 28-year-old mother, Christy Abrahams, and her stepfather, 31-year-old Robert Smith. Their arrests came after police went undercover and were finally able to get Christy to confess to what she'd done to Kaisha.
The base of the bed, like there's a bit of timber, and she's hit her head on that. Okay, and that's when you say that you did what? You took her in the shower then?
Yes, I was trying to wake her up. I got the cold water on her, trying to wake her up, and she wouldn't.
The suitcase, now, I need to know.
He buried it, dug a hole, and then we went there, and he put her in there.
Who was carrying Kaisha?
She was the little suitcase.
Right.
I don't know, she just started making weird noises. We thought it would go away, and when it didn't, and then in the morning, she wouldn't go.
The mother said that on July 12, 2010, Kaisha had been refusing to put on her pajamas. So Christy had given her what she called a little nudge with her foot. This caused Kaisha to fall and hit her head against the bed. Even though she said that the 6-year-old's body felt like jelly at this point, Christy insisted that when she asked Kaisha to squeeze her finger, she did. But then she went funny. So Christy put her in the shower to try to wake her up. Kaisha started making weird noises, but her mother believed that she would be fine, so she put her to bed. The next morning, the little girl was found not breathing. Christy said that she and Robert then went out to the garage and got a suitcase to put her daughter's body into. The suitcase then remained in Kaisha's bedroom for 5 days. After that, Christy and Robert had gotten a taxi to Shalvey, about 7 minutes away from their home, and there they disposed of her body. According to Christy, Robert had placed branches on Kaisha's body, then poured petrol on her and lit her on fire. The little girl's remains were buried in a shallow grave. Prior to her confession, Christy had inadvertently led authorities to where Kaisha was when she went to visit the location on what would have been her 7th birthday. It was at that point that both she and Robert were arrested and charged with the little girl's murder. They were held without bond.
A community gives up hope for little Kaisha.
It just breaks my heart.
They've been praying for her for so long. An emotional community turned its anger on her mother and stepfather.
Run in hell! Run in hell!
Family friends who once supported the couple felt their sympathy had been abused and marched on Mount Druitt Police Station.
What's in my heart is happiness for Kaisha, sadness and a lot of mixed emotions.
It was a more sombre group that gathered at the shrine outside the unit where Kaisha went missing. The overwhelming show of support for her continued as they placed toys, balloons and lit candles. The shrine has been in place since the little girl disappeared, a sign the community hadn't given up hope.
She's loved in so many different ways by people that she never ever knew.
Charged with murdering their 6-year-old girl, Kaisha's mother, Christy Abrahams, and stepfather, Robert Smith, were taken to court this morning, left in no doubt about the community's rage.
Despite Christy's claims that her daughter's death was just an accident, Kaisha's autopsy showed that she had been the victim of severe CA in the months leading up to her death. The little girl had teeth fractures and 10 separate injuries to her head, jaw, and body. Her jawbone had been broken in 2 separate places. Following Robert and Christy's arrests, more information about Christy and Kaisha's lives started to come to light. When Christy was younger, she had been the victim of violence at the hands of her alcoholic father. At the time she was 10, her mother died from a seizure, and she and her younger brother were the only ones who were home, so she witnessed it all. After her mother's death, Christy's father did not want custody of her or her brother, so they were sent to live in foster care. As a teenager, a psychologist diagnosed Christy as having an intellectual disability. Then when she was 19, she had met Chris Whippert, and she became pregnant with their first child soon after. Chris would say that during an argument he and Christy had, he would find her punching herself in her pregnant stomach. She would still end up carrying the pregnancy to full term and give birth to the couple's son, Aiden. Shortly after he was born, social services made a visit to the home, but found nothing of concern. However, after Christy and Chris got into another fight, authorities were called. Chris would tell officers that Christy wasn't coping well, and she was mixing her medication. She had thrown all his clothes and his stereo off their balcony the night prior. Christy also tossed a lit candle at him while holding Aiden, which made hot wax go everywhere, nearly burning the newborn. After that, the father said that Christy had been up all night with their son, and she had threatened to throw the infant off the balcony if he didn't stop crying and let her get some sleep. Chris sounded desperate, and he didn't know what to do. When an officer then went to speak with Christy, she refused to open the door and let them inside. But upon talking to a community service worker, the officer felt assured that Aiden would be removed from her care that same night. That didn't happen, however, and just a few weeks later, on March 22nd, 2003, 6-week-old Aiden would pass away. According to Chris's mother, her son had rushed to her house and said, "Aiden's blue, and he's dead, and he's cold." Christy's up there screaming and screaming, "Mum. I found him, and he was on his face." Aiden's postmortem found no signs that he had been abused, and his cause of death was determined to be a result of sudden infant death syndrome. Following Christy's arrest for Kaisha's murder, officials said that they were likely going to be taking another look at Aiden's death too. However, I was unable to find any further updates on that. It was a little over a year after Aiden died that Kaisha was born. When she was 15 months old, Christy and Chris got into their last fight, and Christy forced him to leave for good. As the couple was screaming at each other, the mother suddenly reached down and picked up her daughter by the throat. Then she carried the toddler into the living room in this same manner and tossed her onto the couch. When Kaisha crawled back towards Christy, she responded aggressively again. She picked up her daughter and bit the 15-month-old on her shoulder. Kaisha began wailing, and Chris called the police. Christy was arrested and later convicted, but she was given a 12-month good behavior bond. Kaisha's father, Chris, was originally granted custody of his daughter. However, the Department of Family and Community Services ended up placing her into foster care. In October of 2006, Christy was arrested yet again. This time it was for having outstanding warrants for driving without a license. 2 months later, after the mother had taken part in anger management counseling, Kaisha was returned to her. Then while Kaisha was at the hospital in November of 2007, during the birth of her younger sibling, a nurse noticed that she had bruises on her face. She reported it, and the next day, Kaisha was interviewed by a child service worker without her mother present. The entire time, Kaisha was wearing a hat and kept turning her face away from the caseworker. The little girl said that she could not remember where the bruises on her face had come from. But when a cigarette burn was also found on her body, she said that it was her mother who had caused it. Regardless, no further action was taken. There had been multiple reports from various family members, neighbors, and friends who said that Kaisha frequently had bruises to different parts of her body, and that Christy had been seen hitting and screaming awful things at her daughter on multiple occasions. It's believed that Kaisha's abuse had escalated in the last 18 months of her life. 1 month before Kaisha had been killed, in June of 2010, Christy called up her father, Rodney Jones, the same man who had been a less than great father to her when she was younger. She told him that she, quote, couldn't fucking handle this kid anymore. Christy said, I'm sick of her. I'll hurt her. I'll kill her. The mother claimed that she was sick of Kaisha shitting and pissing in her bed and, quote, fucking up at school. Upon hearing this, Rodney had begun making preparations for his granddaughter to come live with him. But apparently Christy had delayed Kaisha's planned move by a few weeks. The little girl had only attended school 4 times in her short life, and this had prompted 7 different visits from education officials. However, Christy would never open the door for them, and eventually she called the Department of Education and said that she didn't want anybody in her business. She was then informed that the department would be taking legal action since Kaisha's attendance at school was mandatory. In the few times that the little girl had gone to school, her teachers noticed bruises on her head and face. Multiple people also said that Kaisha would flinch when her mother just raised her hand casually in conversation. It appeared the 6-year-old was scared of her mother. Now, the reason for all of Christy's abuse towards her daughter was apparently because Kaisha reminded her too much of her biological father, Chris. Christy's friend Allison said that the last time she had seen the 6-year-old was on July 11th. At the time, Kaisha was sitting in the car while Christy was outside smoking. Kaisha asked her mother if she could get out, to which Christy responded, "No, you fucking can't. Shut up and sit in the car." After Christy had killed her daughter, she and Robert got rid of all of Kaisha's belongings and also disposed of the SIM cards in their phones. Then once the little girl was reported as missing, the couple went out and bought numerous presents and a Tinkerbell poster. Also, they could maintain that they were loving parents. Before either Christy or Robert would make it to trial, in November of 2012, Kaisha's biological father, Chris, would pass away. He had been suffering from different ailments, including diabetes, and was battling addiction. In July of 2013, Christy finally went to trial.
Exactly 3 years after Abrahams stuffed Kaisha's tiny body in a suitcase to get rid of it, she arrived at court to familiar sounds.
You murderer! Kid killer!
Christy had previously tried to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter, but prosecutors had rejected it. So during the first day of her trial, Christy decided to plead guilty to murdering her daughter Kaisha. This entitled her to a 10% reduction in her sentence. During the hearing, a forensic pathologist would tell the court that Kaisha's teeth revealed she had received as many as 5 blows to her jaw prior to her death. She would have been in a significant amount of pain. The pathologist also said that many of the 6-year-old's bones showed new formation and thickening, a trait of healing injuries. He believed that these injuries had been sustained in the weeks and months leading up to Kaisha's death. Christy would later be sentenced to serve 21 years and 6 months with a minimum of 16 years served. She will be eligible for parole next year in 2027. As Christy was taken out of court, her former friend Allison Anderson shouted for her to rot in hell.
Kaisha's biological grandmother, whose son Christopher Whippet has since died, was pleased with the result.
So it's finally over and done with, and she's going to sit there and rot.
Others were disgraced to hear the judge found the murder to be in the middle range of seriousness.
We got justice, but not the justice that we expected.
In December of 2011, Christy's boyfriend, Robert Smith, was found guilty of manslaughter. He had previously confessed to police that he had heard a loud bang coming from Kaisha's bedroom about 2 weeks before she was reported as missing. He claimed that he had found the little girl lying on the floor unconscious, and he tried to wake her, but this didn't work. And instead of calling an ambulance, he just went to bed, then to work the next day. When he'd returned, he found that Kaisha was dead. Robert additionally told authorities that he had been like a father to the little girl. He said, "She's not my daughter, you know, but I treat her like she was." Robert was later sentenced to 12 years in jail, and in April of 2023, he made parole. However, less than 2 years after his release, in February of 2025, Robert died. Kaisha's funeral was held privately on September 28, 2011, and mourners wore her favorite color, purple, in her honor. Unbelievably, both Christy and Robert put in requests to attend her funeral. However, these were denied. A public memorial service was held for Kaisha a couple of weeks later at the Holy Family Church in Mount Druitt.
Laid to rest.
On what would have been her 13th birthday, April 22, 2017, a celebration was held at her favorite park, Elizabeth Johnson Reserve. During this time, Allison Anderson unveiled a purple butterfly rocker that she had installed at the playground in Kaisha's honor. Thank you for listening to Kaisha's story today. This poor little girl never got to live a happy childhood. She was constantly in fear of her evil mother, something a child should never have to go through. What do you think about this one? If you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. And turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least 2 times every week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon, so check it out on patreon.com/awickedworld, or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims are never forgotten, and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a story you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email to awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.